Have you ever met someone who stays almost frighteningly calm even when everything around them is falling apart? Bad news? They stay composed. Drama? They keep their distance. A big argument?
There is a particular kind of person you have probably encountered at least once in your life. They are not the loudest in the room. They are not the ones who demand attention or perform their emotions for an audience. Instead, they sit quietly in the corner, watching everything unfold with steadiness that almost feels unnatural. When chaos breaks out around them, they do not flinch. When someone delivers devastating news, they absorb it without crumbling. When arguments erupt, they step back, observe, and wait. Most people look at this kind of person and assume they are cold, detached, perhaps even arrogant. But that assumption could not be further from the truth. What you are witnessing is not the absence of feeling. It is a result of feeling too much for too long, without enough support. These are people who have walked through fires that most others will never experience. And the stillness you see in them is not emptiness. It is depth. It is a quiet that forms at the bottom of a very deep well. So what exactly shapes a person like this? What are the signs that someone has carried more than their fair share of life's weight? And perhaps more importantly, what do those signs tell us about the extraordinary resilience that can grow from extraordinary pain? One of the most striking things about people who have suffered deeply is their emotional sensitivity toward others. This might seem contradictory at first. How can someone who appears emotionally guarded also be the most emotionally perceptive person in the room? The answer lies in what pain teaches. When a person has spent years navigating environments where they had to read the mood of a room just to stay safe, their brain develops an almost automatic sensitivity to the emotional states of others. They notice when your voice drops half a tone lower than usual. They catch the split-second flicker of sadness that crosses your face before you replace it with a smile. They sense the tension in your shoulders before you even realize it is there yourself. This is not a gift they were born with. It was earned through difficulty. Having once been the person who was hurting silently while the world moved on around them, they made a quiet internal promise. They would not let others feel that invisible, and so they became the ones who check in, who sit down beside you, who ask a question no one else thought to ask. Because they are so attuned to the people around them, those who have gone through too much often fall into the role of emotional caretaker. They become the stabilizing force in their families, their friendships, and their workplaces. When tension rises, they are the ones who de-escalate. When someone is struggling, they are the first to offer support. When a group is on the verge of fracturing, they quietly hold it together. On the surface, this looks like generosity, and in many ways it is. But it is also a deeply ingrained survival response. Psychologists refer to this pattern as fawning, a stress response in which a person instinctively manages the emotions of those around them as a way of keeping themselves safe. If everyone around me is calm, then I am safe. If I can prevent conflict before it starts, then I will not have to endure the fallout. The painful irony is that these individuals rarely receive the same care they so freely give. They hold the space for everyone else's emotions while quietly managing their own alone. And when someone does notice and asks if they are okay, the answer is almost always the same. A small smile, a wave of the hand. I'm fine. People who have experienced prolonged hardship often cannot fully switch off their internal alarm system. Clinically, this is known as hypervigilance, and it is one of the most exhausting and least understood symptoms of trauma. The nervous system, after being conditioned to expect danger, does not simply relax because the danger has passed. It remains at a low hum of alertness, scanning constantly for signs that something might go wrong again. This shows up in subtle but telling ways. They tend to sit where they can see the door. They notice sounds that other people tune out completely. A sudden loud noise, an unexpected change in someone's tone, an unfamiliar environment. These things trigger a physical response that they cannot always explain or control. Their heart rate spikes. Their body tenses. Their mind begins running contingency plans before the conscious brain has even caught up. The people around them may find this baffling. You're safe now, they say. Just relax. But safety, for someone whose history has taught them that it can be stripped away without warning, is not something that arrives simply because the circumstances have changed. It is something that must be slowly, carefully, and repeatedly proven over time. Hand in hand with hypervigilance comes a deep and often painful difficulty with trust. Not because these individuals do not want to connect. They do. Not because they are incapable of love or loyalty. They are often the most loyal people you will ever meet. But because somewhere along the way, the people they trusted most were also the people who hurt them most. When betrayal comes from a stranger, it is painful. When it comes from someone you loved and depended on, it rewires something fundamental in your understanding of human relationships. You learn, on a cellular level, that openness is risk, that vulnerability has a cost. And so you build walls, not to keep people out forever, but to buy yourself time to determine whether this person is safe, whether this moment is real, whether lowering your guard will end in the same devastation it once did. For these individuals, trust is not a starting point. It is a destination that requires a long journey of consistent, proven behavior to reach. Because they cannot fully trust the world or the people in it to be predictable. People who have been through too much often live inside their own heads to an exhausting degree. They run mental simulations. They prepare for outcomes before they happen. They imagine the worst-case scenario not because they are pessimistic by nature, but because preparation feels like protection. There's a quiet logic to this. If I have already imagined how this might fall apart, then when it does, I will not be blindsided. I will not shatter. I was ready. Overthinking in this context is not a character flaw. It is a coping mechanism that once served a very real purpose. The trouble is that it tends to run long after the original threat has passed, burning through mental and emotional energy at a rate that leaves these individuals quietly depleted. After years of living in instability, whether financial, emotional, relational, or otherwise, what these individuals desire most is not excitement. It is peace, not the dramatic, cinematic kind of peace. The quiet, ordinary, almost boring kind. A consistent morning routine. A home that feels like a sanctuary. Relationships that do not require constant management. Work that has clear boundaries and predictable rhythms. People who have not known chaos may look at this preference and call it unadventurous. But for someone who has spent years not knowing what tomorrow would bring, a predictable Tuesday is nothing short of a miracle. Stability is not a consolation prize for them. It is the dream. Closely tied to this craving for peace is a genuine need for time alone, not because they dislike people. Often they care deeply about the people in their lives. But the combination of constant emotional attunement, hypervigilance, and overthinking means that social interaction, however enjoyable, is also profoundly draining. Solitude is where they recover. It is where they process the emotional residue of the day, where they allow themselves to feel things they kept contained in public, where they can simply exist without performing strength or managing anyone else's experience. For them, being alone is not loneliness. It is restoration. One of the most paradoxical qualities in people who have suffered greatly is their fierce independence. They will carry enormous burdens without asking for help. They will figure out solutions on their own rather than reaching out. They will show up for themselves consistently because they have learned, often the hard way, that they cannot always count on others to do so. This independence is genuinely impressive, but it can also become a kind of isolation. When you have taught yourself that needing others is dangerous, you can end up carrying weights that were never meant to be carried alone. And yet, despite all of it, something extraordinary often emerges from people who endure the most. The losses, the sleepless nights, the years of quiet struggle, they do not leave these individuals broken. They leave them with a depth of understanding that simply cannot be acquired any other way. They know what matters. They know how to sit with someone in pain without trying to fix it. They know that most of what people worry about is small and that the truly hard things are survivable. They carry a wisdom that is not academic but lived, forged in the fires of real experience. Psychology calls this post-traumatic growth, and it is real. The same pressure that crushes some things transforms others into something far stronger and more valuable than what existed before. If you recognize yourself in any of this, know that what you carry is not a weakness. It is evidence of everything you have already survived. And that is not a small thing. That is everything.